I gave my parents a luxurious one-week trip to Europe with me. When I picked them up to go to the airport, they told me they decided to go with my jobless sister instead of me. My mother smiled. Your sister needed some rest, so we decided to take her. I didn't say anything. However, when they landed in Europe, I was already there. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Margaret Chen and I'm 58 years old. I've spent the last 35 years building a successful career in international consulting. The kind of work that took me away from home more often than I would have liked, but it provided well for my family. My parents Richard and Susan are both in their early 80s now. Dad's hair has gone completely silver, and Mom still wears her reading glasses on a chain around her neck just like she did when I was young. They raised 3 children in a modest 2-bedroom house in Seattle. I was the middle child. My older brother Daniel moved to Australia years ago for work. We exchange Christmas cards and occasional video calls, but the distance has made us strangers in many ways. Then there's my younger sister Diane. Diane is 53 and has never quite found her footing in life. She's jumped from job to job over the years, each one ending with some complaint about unfair treatment or impossible expectations. For the past 2 years, she's been unemployed, living in Mom and Dad's basement, and relying on their pension to get by. I've watched my parents age these past few years with a mixture of love and concern. Dad's knees aren't what they used to be, and Mom forgets things now and then. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me that time is precious. That's why I decided to plan something special. A week in Europe, Paris, Rome, and the Swiss Alps. First-class flights, boutique hotels guided. Tours of the Louvre and the Colosseum. A sunset dinner cruise along the Seine. I'd been saving for this trip for 2 years. It wasn't just about the money, though. I wanted time with them. Quality time. The kind we'd missed out on during my career-building years. I wanted to walk with Dad through the gardens of Versailles, to see Mom's face light up at the Sistine Chapel, to sit together at a cafe in Rome and just talk, really talk. I called them on a Tuesday evening in March. Mom answered with her usual cheerful, "Hello. Mom, it's Margaret. I have something I want to ask you both." "Oh, wonderful. Your father's right here. Let me put you on speaker." I heard the fumbling of buttons, and then Dad's voice. "Hello, sweetheart." "Hi, Dad. Listen, I've been planning something special. I want to take you both to Europe for a week. All expenses paid. We'd leave in June." There was silence on the other end. Then Mom's voice cracked slightly. "Oh, Margaret, that's too generous. We couldn't possibly." "Yes, you can. I've already started making arrangements. I want to do this. I want us to have this time together." Dad cleared his throat the way he does when he's emotional. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Really wonderful. We'd be honored." I spent the next 3 months planning every detail. I researched accessible hotels with elevators and comfortable beds. I booked restaurants that offered quiet corners and menus with options for Dad's dietary restrictions. I even hired a private driver for the days when walking might be too much. I sent them the itinerary in May, a beautiful bound booklet with photos of each destination. Mom called me in tears. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given us." She said, "I can't wait." June arrived faster than expected. I flew into Seattle 2 days before our scheduled departure. I wanted to spend some time with them before the trip, to go over last-minute details and make sure they had everything they needed. When I arrived at their house, Diane answered the door. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore an oversized sweater that had seen better days. "Hey, Margaret," she said without much enthusiasm. "Come in." I stepped inside and immediately smelled Mom's cooking. She was making her famous pot roast, the same one she'd made every Sunday when we were kids. Mom appeared from the kitchen wiping her hands on her apron. "Margaret, you're here." She hugged me tightly. "I'm so excited I can barely sleep." "Where's Dad?" "In the living room watching the news. Go say hello." I found Dad in his recliner. He smiled when he saw me and struggled to get up. "Stay seated, Dad." I bent down and hugged him. "You ready for our adventure?" "I've been ready since you called," he said. "Your mother's been packing and repacking for weeks." We had dinner that night around the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals. Diane was quiet. She picked at her food and avoided eye contact. Mom did most of the talking, asking questions about Paris and Rome. "What should we wear? What's the weather like? Will we have time to shop?" Dad added occasional comments about World War II history. He'd always been fascinated by that era and was excited to visit the sites he'd only read about. After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes. Diane disappeared upstairs. That's when Mom brought it up. "Margaret, honey, I need to talk to you about something. Sure, Mom, what is it? She dried her hands slowly, choosing her words carefully. It's about Diane. I felt my stomach tighten. What about her? She's been struggling lately, more than usual. She's depressed and anxious. The unemployment has really taken a toll on her. I know, Mom, I've noticed. Mom turned to face me. She's been talking about how much she needs a break, how she just wants to escape for a while. And I thought maybe she trailed off. I felt the direction this was heading. Maybe she could come with us. Instead of you. The words hung in the air like smoke. I couldn't quite process them. Instead of me, yes, I know it sounds terrible, but sweetheart, you travel all the time. You've been to Europe a dozen times. This would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Diane. Mom, this trip was for us. For the three of us. I planned this so we could spend time together. I know, and we're so grateful, but Diane needs this more than you do right now. She needs to feel valued, to feel like someone cares about her happiness. I care about her happiness, but this was supposed to be our trip. Your father and I talked about it. We think it would mean so much to her. Please, Margaret, do this for your sister. I stood there washing the same plate over and over, my hands moving mechanically while my mind raced. Part of me wanted to say no, to stand my ground and insist that I'd earned this time with my parents. But another part of me, the part that had been conditioned, since childhood, to be the responsible one, the accommodating one. That part couldn't find the words to refuse. I'll think about it, I finally said. That's all Mom asked for. Just think about it. I barely slept that night. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the times I'd stepped aside for Diane. When we were kids, I'd given up my spot in the school play so she could have it. She'd wanted the lead role and Mom had asked me to audition for something smaller. In high school, I'd worked part-time jobs to save for college while Diane spent her allowance on clothes and concerts when she dropped out of college after one semester. Mom and Dad had used my college fund to pay off her debts. I'd taken out loans instead. I told myself it was fine, that I was capable and Diane needed more support. But now, as an adult lying in my childhood home, I felt the weight of those accumulated sacrifices. The next morning I came downstairs to find Mom and Dad at the kitchen table with Diane. They were looking at the travel itinerary. When they saw me, the conversation stopped abruptly. Morning, I said. Morning, sweetheart, Mom replied, too cheerfully. We were just talking about the trip. I poured myself coffee and sat down. And what did you decide? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. We think it would be wonderful if Diane came with us. Mom said, you've been so generous to plan all of this. But Diane really needs a break, and you'll have other opportunities to travel with us. I looked at Diane. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Is this what you want, Diane? She shrugged. I mean, if you don't mind, it would be nice to get away. I don't mind, I heard myself say. Even though my heart was breaking, you should go, have a wonderful time. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're so understanding, Margaret. This means the world to us. The next 2 days passed in a blur. I helped them finish packing. I went over the itinerary with Diane. I made sure they had all the confirmations and contact information they needed. I smiled and nodded and played the part of the gracious sister. On the morning of the flight, I drove them to the airport. We loaded their luggage into my rental car. 3 large suitcases and several carry-ons. The car was quiet during the drive. Dad hummed softly to himself. Mom chatted nervously about hoping she hadn't forgotten anything. Diane stared out the window. At the airport, I helped them check in. I walked them as far as security would allow. This is where we say goodbye. Mom said. She hugged me tightly. Thank you for this, Margaret. Thank you for being so wonderful. Dad hugged me next. We'll take lots of pictures, he promised. I know you will, Dad. Have the time of your lives. Diane hugged me last. It was brief and awkward. Thanks, Meg, she mumbled, using the childhood nickname I'd always hated. I watched them disappear through security. Mom turned back once to wave, and then they were gone. I walked back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and cried. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that wouldn't stop. I cried for the trip I'd lost, for the time with my parents I'd never get back, for being the daughter who always understood, who always accommodated, who always came second. But I wasn't done yet. I'd planned this trip for months. I knew every detail, every reservation, every confirmation number, and I had my own ticket. I'd booked myself on a different flight, one that arrived in Paris 6 hours after theirs. I dried my eyes, started the car, and drove home to pack my own bags. I arrived in Paris the next morning. The city was exactly as I remembered it, elegant and alive with history. The June air was warm, the streets filled with tourists and locals alike. I checked into a small hotel near the Latin Quarter. Not one of the luxury places I'd booked for my family, but comfortable enough. I unpacked, and then I made my way to their hotel. The Grand Hotel on the right bank. 5 stars with a view of the Eiffel Tower. I'd spent hours choosing it. I walked into the lobby and approached the concierge. "Good morning," I said in French. "I'm here to confirm a reservation for the Chen family." The concierge typed on his computer. "Ah yes, Richard and Susan Chen with their daughter Diane. They checked in early this morning." "Perfect. I'm Margaret Chen. Richard and Susan's other daughter. I just wanted to make sure everything is in order." The concierge smiled. "Everything is perfect, mademoiselle. They seemed very pleased with their suite." I thanked him and left. I spent that first day exploring the neighborhood, visiting small cafes and bookshops, giving my family time to rest from their flight. That evening I made my way to the restaurant, where I'd booked their dinner. A charming bistro near Notre Dame. I arrived early and took a table in the corner, far enough away to not be immediately noticed, but close enough to see. They arrived right on time. Mom looked radiant in a navy dress I'd helped her pick out. Dad wore slacks and a button-down shirt, looking more energetic than I'd seen him in years. And Diane looked uncomfortable. She kept tugging at her dress and glancing around. They were seated by the window. I watched as Dad ordered wine, as Mom studied the menu with delight, as Diane checked her phone repeatedly. Their appetizers arrived. Mom tried to engage Diane in conversation, but Diane's responses were brief, distracted. I could see Mom's smile falter slightly, could see Dad trying to fill the silence with stories about the flight. After an hour I paid my bill and left. I walked along the Seine as the sun set, thinking about what I'd witnessed. The next morning I followed them to the Louvre. I stayed several rooms behind, watching as they moved through the galleries. Dad was in his element, reading every placard, taking his time with each painting. Mom held his arm, pointing out details and colors. Diane trailed behind, scrolling through her phone. At one point Mom tried to take a photo of the 3 of them. She asked a tourist to help. In the photo I saw later, Dad and Mom were smiling genuinely. Diane had a forced smile, her eyes empty. This pattern continued for 3 days. I followed them to Versailles, to the Musée d'Orsay, to a dinner cruise on the Seine. Each time I watched from a distance. Each time I saw the same thing. Mom and Dad were having a wonderful time. They held hands, they laughed, they marveled at the beauty around them. But Diane was miserable. She complained about the walking, about the heat, about the crowds. On the evening of the 3rd day something shifted. They were having dinner at a cafe in Montmartre. I was seated at a nearby table, hidden behind a menu. "Diane, why don't you seem happy?" Mom asked. Her voice carried just enough for me to hear. "I am happy," Diane said, unconvincingly. "No, you're not. You've been on your phone this entire trip. You haven't engaged with any of the activities we've planned. What's going on?" Diane put down her phone, looked at her parents. "I didn't ask to come on this trip," she said. "What do you mean? You begged me to let you come." "No. You and Dad decided I should come. You made me feel guilty about Margaret, about how she travels all the time and I never get to go anywhere. But this isn't my kind of vacation. I don't care about museums and fancy restaurants. I wanted to go to a beach resort, somewhere I could just relax, not walk 10 miles a day looking at old paintings." The silence that followed was heavy. Mom's face fell. Dad looked down at his plate. "You mean you didn't want this?" Mom asked quietly, her voice breaking. "I wanted a vacation," Diane said, "but not this one." I felt anger rise in my chest. But also something else. Vindication, perhaps. Mom stood up abruptly. "Excuse me." She walked away from the table, heading toward the restroom. Dad watched her go, then turned to Diane. "Your mother and sister planned this trip with so much love," he said, his voice steady but sad. "Margaret sacrificed her time with us so you could come. And you can't even pretend to be grateful." "I didn't ask her to do that," Diane shot back. "That was her choice. It was your choice to accept, and it's your choice to make everyone around you miserable." Dad rarely raised his voice, but now there was steel in his tone. "Your sister has spent her whole life accommodating you, supporting you, and you've never once said thank you. I decided it was time." I stood up from my table and walked over to theirs. Hello, Mom and Dad. Diane. They looked up in shock. Margaret, Dad said, What are you doing here? I came to check on my investment, I said calmly, taking the empty seat next to Dad. I wanted to see if the trip I planned was being enjoyed. You've been here this whole time, Mom asked. She'd returned from the restroom, her eyes red, since the first day, following us. Yes, why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to see the truth. And now I have. Diane stared at me. You've been spying on us. I've been observing. There's a difference. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, I gave you this trip because I love you, because I wanted to create memories with you. When you asked me to step aside for Diane, I agreed. Not because I didn't care, but because I've spent my whole life being told that Diane needs more, that I'm capable and she's fragile, that I should understand, and I do understand. But understanding doesn't mean I don't hurt. Tears rolled down Mom's cheeks. We made a mistake, she whispered. A terrible mistake. We took you for granted, Margaret. We always have, and I'm so sorry. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because it's time we were honest with each other. Diane, you've been given so many opportunities, so much support, but you've never learned to be grateful, to work for what you have, and Mom and Dad, you've enabled. That by always protecting her from consequences. The table was silent. Finally, Diane spoke, her voice small. You're right, I didn't want to come on this trip. I wanted you to come, Margaret. I thought if I complained enough, if I made it clear I didn't want to be here, Mom and Dad would send me home and call you. But they kept trying to make me happy, and I kept being miserable, and now I've ruined everything. She started to cry, not dramatic tears, but real ones, filled with genuine remorse. I'm sorry, she said. To all of you, I'm sorry I'm such a disappointment. You're not a disappointment, I said gently. You're lost, and we've all contributed to that by not holding you accountable. But it's not too late to change. Dad cleared his throat. What do we do now? I pulled out my phone, showed them my flight confirmation. I have a return ticket for 3 days from now. Diane, if you want to go home early, you can take my ticket. I'll stay and finish the trip with Mom and Dad. If they'll have me. Mom grabbed my other hand. Of course we'll have you. Nothing would make us happier. Diane wiped her eyes. You do that for me. After everything. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me, because I deserve this trip. And I'm not going to let anyone take it away from me anymore. Not even myself. We rearranged everything that night. Diane flew home the next morning. Before she left, she hugged me. A real hug this time. Thank you, she said, for being honest, for not letting me destroy this. I hugged her back. Use this time to figure out what you really want, Diane, and then go after it. No more excuses. She nodded. I will, I promise. The next 4 days with Mom and Dad were everything I'd hoped for. We took our time in each place. Dad and I talked about history and life. Mom and I shopped for souvenirs and laughed about old memories. In Rome, we threw coins in the Trevi fountain. In the Swiss Alps, we rode a cable car to the top of a mountain and just sat, watching the world spread out before us. One evening in Switzerland, as we sat on the hotel balcony watching the sunset, Dad spoke. I've been thinking a lot these past few days about the kind of father I've been. Go on, Dad. I always thought I was being fair, giving each of you what you needed. But I see now that I confused need with want. Diane wanted things, and we gave them to her. You needed things, recognition, priority, time. And we gave you responsibilities instead. Mom nodded. We told ourselves you were fine, that you were strong, that you didn't need us the way Diane did. But everyone needs to feel valued, to feel chosen, and we didn't choose you enough. I felt tears prick my eyes. But I smiled. You're choosing me now. That's what matters. We can't give you back those years, Mom said. But we can do better going forward. And we will, I believe you. The rest of the trip passed too quickly. We savored every moment, every meal, every conversation. On our last night in Paris, we returned to the restaurant where everything had changed. The same waiter recognized us. He smiled. The whole family this time. Yes, I said. The whole family. Over dinner, Dad proposed a toast to Margaret for her patience, her generosity, and her unwillingness to settle for less than she deserves. We clinked glasses, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete, seen, valued. When we returned home, Diane was waiting at the airport. She looked different, more put together, more present. She hugged each of us, then pulled me aside. "I got a job," she said. "A real one. I start next week." "That's wonderful, Diane. And I've been thinking about what you said. About figuring out what I want. I think I want to go back to school, finish my degree." "Good. That's really good. I'm going to pay you back. For the ticket, for everything, you don't have to. It might take a while, but I want to." I hugged her. "Then we'll call it a loan. With very reasonable terms." She laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in years. Over the following months, things shifted in our family. Not dramatically, but steadily. Mom and Dad made more effort to include me, to ask about my life, to show interest in my work. Diane followed through on her promises. She kept her job, enrolled in online classes, started paying rent to Mom and Dad. We began having monthly family dinners, all of us, including Daniel, who joined by video call from Australia. The conversations were different now, more honest, more balanced. Everyone had a voice, everyone was heard. A year later, I planned another trip, this time to Japan. I invited my whole family. Daniel couldn't make it because of work, but he sent his blessing. Diane hesitated when I asked her, "I don't want to take your spot again." She said, "You're not taking it. I'm offering it. But only if you really want to come." "I do, I really do." So the four of us went to Japan. We walked through temples in Kyoto. We ate sushi in Tokyo. We soaked in hot springs in the mountains. And this time Diane was present. She asked questions. She took photos. She engaged. One evening as we sat in a traditional ryokan, wearing yukata robes and drinking tea, Diane looked at me. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for letting me come to Europe, for telling me the truth, for not giving up on me." I squeezed her hand. "We're family. That's what family does," but it took me a long time to understand that family doesn't mean always sacrificing yourself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to stand firm in your worth, to insist on being valued, to refuse to disappear. Mom raised her teacup to Margaret for teaching us all that lesson. We drank, and I felt grateful, not just for the trips or the reconciliation, but for finally understanding that kindness to others must include kindness to yourself. That giving from an empty cup serves no one. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, "I matter too. I'm 58 now, my hair is starting to gray, my body doesn't move quite as easily as it used to. But I've learned something valuable. It's never too late to change, to speak up, to reclaim your worth." My relationship with my family isn't perfect. We still have disagreements, still fall into old patterns sometimes. But we catch ourselves now. We apologize. We try again. And that's all anyone can really do. Keep trying, keep growing, keep choosing love. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. You're someone who has spent your life accommodating others. Who has made yourself small to make others comfortable. Who has swallowed your needs to keep the peace. I want you to know. Your needs matter, your voice matters, you matter. And it's okay to take up space, to ask for what you want, to insist on being seen. The people who truly love you will rise to meet you there. And the ones who don't, well, that tells you something important too. Life is short, too short to spend it disappearing. So take the trip, speak the truth, stand in your worth. And if you have to, show up anyway, even when you're not invited, especially when you're not invited. Because sometimes the most radical act of love is refusing to abandon yourself. That's the real journey. Not the one through Europe or Japan, but the one back to yourself. And it's worth every step. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about life, family, and finding your worth. And please leave a comment below telling us about a time you chose yourself. Your story might inspire someone else to do the same. Thank you for listening.